you for popping on for the call tonight. Tonight we are joined by Nic. Can you pronounce your last name for me?
It's pronounced Loiseau.
Loiseau. Okay, Nic
Perfect.
Loiseau. She is the volunteer programs manager with the National Park Service. So the National Park Service administers the North Country National Scenic Trail, providing management oversight to the entire trail by working with federal agencies, state and local governments, private organizations, landowners and land users, and providing guidance to the NCTA as a partner. So I believe tonight Nic is going to be sharing a little bit about her experience working with the Park Service, and then we'll save kind of a Q&A for the end. So I'll let you take over.
All right.
And I think I might have to share the screen with you so you can do that.
All right. Thank you, Felicia. So give me 1 second. I got to move some things over, make sure we're good to go. Bear with me for a minute. Oh, where to go? Oops. Okay. What do y'all see?
I see a screen that says
sorry. Careers with the National Park Service. We see it.
You see it. All right. Okay. So as I mentioned to Felicia earlier on, the way my screen is set up is there's presentation on one side and my slides on the other. So if you have any comments or questions, I won't be able to see them in the chat. So as Felicia said, let's save those for the end, and I could go through those. All right. This evening, I'm going to talk about National Park Service careers, and I'm going to kick it off with a quick overview of my career. And it all began with 4 words. Why don't you apply? I was in college, and it was about a month before graduating, and a professor sent an email out about an internship opportunity in Canyonlands National Park in Utah. And he's like, so did you get my email? You know, what are you going to do after graduation? I was like, I don't know, typical summer job. And I had a great summer job. And he's like, why don't you apply? So despite being super busy with finals and research papers and closing up the year, I decided to send out my application. The next week, I had a short interview, and then I accepted the position, and I moved and went to Canyonlands National Park. Little backstory, I'm originally from Connecticut. I went to school at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania. So I moved from Connecticut to Utah. Here at Canyonlands, I was with the Student Conservation Association with this internship. And this was a great start to my career because this position offered lots of variety. I staffed the front desk, I collected fees at the entrance station, I issued permits in the backcountry office, I presented an evening program, and I roved the beautiful trails. From there, I took another internship at Saguaro National Park. So I moved to Tucson, Arizona to assist with the group volunteer program. I worked very closely with groups of volunteers who came to the park to donate their time, and most of them was for 1-week projects. This was the opportunity that stuck with me and later guided me to my current path as a volunteer program manager. My first seasonal position was at Olympic National Park. And then I went back to Olympic for 2 other seasons, and there I was a visitor use assistant. Specifically, I issued backcountry permits, and I also got to go on backcountry patrols. And as you could see in that bottom left photo, I loved my job. Then I returned to Saguaro, but in a different role. I worked with the trail crew as a temporary hire. As a backcountry generalist in Canyonlands, most of my work was geared to the backcountry. I patrolled by foot, by vehicle, and bike to check on the trail and campsites. I interacted with visitors and I worked on various field projects. And that's me in that Jeep cruising down the backside of Elephant Hill. Pretty fun. I also assisted with natural and cultural resources, participated in search and rescues, and staffed the backcountry office. It was a job that didn't feel like a job. I was also an interpreter ranger at Glacier National Park. I interacted with lots of visitors at the visitor center, led multiple guided hikes and boat rides on St. Mary Lake, presented a 15-minute talk on climate change, and gave an evening program about bears. After being a seasonal for 6 years, I got my first permanent job at the Maze District of Canyonlands. It was amazing. See what I did there? There I oversaw the ranger station operations, went on single day and multi-day backcountry patrols, as shown in the photo. And because it was such a small staff, I assisted where needed, including spending significant time with my coworker doing maintenance. During my second year at the Maze, I was offered a temporary assignment as a volunteer program manager for Grand Canyon National Park. I spent 4 months in Arizona. And when I returned to Canyonlands, I developed a volunteer program for the Horseshoe Canyon Unit, known for its awesome rock art and the Great Gallery. My background as a generalist ranger and working with volunteers was a perfect fit at the Outer Banks group. The Outer Banks group is 3 parks administered together, and that's Cape Hatteras National Seashore, Fort Raleigh National Historic Site, and Wright Brothers National Memorial. I moved to North Carolina and was the group's first full-time volunteer and youth program manager in a decade. While working for the Outer Banks group, I had the opportunity to do 2 temporary assignments. The first one was as a volunteer program manager at Rocky Mountain National Park, which has the largest VIP program in Intermountain region. The second was as a district interpreter for Cape Hatteras National Seashore. There you could see the Body Island Lighthouse, and in the front, there's me, dressed up like the lighthouse. It's photo for National Look-alike Day. I oversaw the interpretation operations during the start of the pandemic. And due to the pandemic, one of the goals was how are we going to engage with the public when we couldn't meet in person? One way was to increase our social media presence, and as you could see, we got creative. 2 years ago, I started as the North Country National Scenic Trails volunteer program manager and collateral duty safety officer. I've had an incredible 18-year journey with the National Park Service, but this is my unique story. There are so many other positions, and I like to say there is something in the National Park Service for everyone. The National Park Service has interpreters and education specialists. And even reenactors help sharing the stories. There are careers in law enforcement, medical services, search and rescue, and in aviation, including pilots and aviation managers. The National Park Service has firefighters, smoke jumpers, dispatchers, and fire effects monitors. Structural firefighters too. There are maintenance and automotive mechanics, road crews, heavy equipment operators, wastewater treatment facility managers, engineers, painters, sign makers, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, masons, gardeners, and trail builders and maintainers. There are also opportunities in the science field. There are various ecologists. Their specialties include marine, fire, and aquatic ecology, to name a few. There are geologists and wildlife biologists and fisheries biologists and acoustics biologists, data scientists, hydrologists, physical scientists. Employees work as land and underwater archaeologists, historians, archivists, resource curators, historic landscape architects, and there's more. And there's still more. Even still, this is just a sampling of job opportunities with the National Park Service. If you would like to learn more, there are staff highlights on the National Park Service website. While looking for photos for this presentation, I started going through a rabbit hole reading about all the amazing work employees are doing. You may too. So how do you go about getting a job? It's very important to start getting involved. And one way to do that is to volunteer. There's a website called volunteer.gov, and this is a website to look for volunteer opportunities across the country for federal agencies, not just the National Park Service. And you could search by volunteer events, specific work that you're interested in, location, and also parks. There are also national internship programs on the website, and I'll drop these to Felicia so she could send them in an email to y'all. There's a number of internship programs. They all have specific requirements for age, different types of work, different pay, but the opportunities are endless for internships with the Park Service. As I mentioned, I got my career started off with the Student Conservation Association, and that's how I got my start. USA Jobs is where jobs are posted online. So if you're looking for a full-time permanent job, we've got those. If you're looking for work in parks for a few months as a seasonal ranger, we got those too. USA Jobs is your go-to for seasonal and permanent job announcements. So I ask you, why don't you apply? And here is my contact information. I'm always more than happy to speak with anyone about Park Service careers or how to navigate USA Jobs and the hiring process. So feel free to reach out at any time. And I'm gonna stop sharing now so I could see you all.
I have a question just to kick us off.
Sure.
I've tried to go on USA Jobs and look at it and apply through it, and it has become like a little bit cumbersome. And so eventually I gave up. Do you have any like advice on trying to navigate that website?
I guess keep clicking around with my opinion. It also depends what you want to do on the website. So if you're just searching for jobs, you could search at just at the homepage by keywords, even location, agencies. You could also refine the search. One thing that I've always done is you could have saved searches. So you could save these searches that you click. Say you want to be, I'm going to make it up. Your goal is to be an interpreter in a particular grade level in a particular state. So you could go and refine your search, and then you could save it. And what they do is anytime there's job opportunities, they'll send you an email. So you don't have to keep searching every day, because that could be quite exhausting and also potentially discouraging because you're like, oh man. So I highly recommend those saved searches. So then you get those email notifications. I believe you have to renew those searches every year and just re-engage them so you could continue to get the emails. Another key is to make sure you remember your password. That could be half the frustrating part, is just logging in. It's happened to me. I'm happy to walk through it one-on-one with anybody. But I find that it's harder for me. So I get a new job, right? I'm like, I'm done searching for a little bit. And then, you know, I may pop on it and look. And if I forget sometimes, or they change their website a little bit and then I forget. So I think the key is to kind of keep looking at it periodically so you know where to find things. They also have different hiring authorities. So sometimes you'll have to make sure that you're looking for jobs that you're eligible for. So for example, they have jobs that are open to the public. That means anybody could apply. Then sometimes you'll see jobs that are internal to a particular agency. So it may be only those that work for the National Park Service currently could apply for those positions. So you got to keep an eye on if you're eligible for certain positions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Nick? I could keep going.
I think I missed the very beginning because I had to like step out for a second, but how did you say you got started with the NPS? Like what, I know I've heard of people who it takes them, you know, a few seasons of applying to get in and stuff. Could you remind me how exactly you got in? Did you get in right away, and what kind of background you had a little bit that
Sure.
maybe made it work for you?
Yeah, so I will tell you, I wasn't antsy to get permanent. A lot of people that I meet them, they're like an intern, they're a volunteer, they're first time seasonal. They're like, I want permanent. And my advice is like, enjoy the ride. You know, I lived in 10 states, worked for 10 National Park Service sites. And I feel like I fell into it. I applied for an internship, volunteer at the time. And then I applied to another one and I got that. And through that experience with those internships and by volunteering, I was able to get my first seasonal job. Got the green and gray, the badges, all that bling bling. And that's how it started. And I will tell you, it takes a lot of patience. It is very competitive. But if you want a career in the Park Service, it's worth it. I truly believe in the mission, and it's rewarding. But it could be frustrating because there's, you know, especially seasonal work, certain positions, there's a lot of people and not so many positions. But yeah, patience, and really get involved if you can through internships and volunteering to boost your resume. A supervisor told me this when I was I might have been his volunteer. But he said he was always looking on USA Jobs, always looking, even when he was happy in his job, just to see what was out there and what he needed to do to build his resume for the next job. So I took that. I'm always looking out there, you know, and just to see, hey, you know, doing that may be great skill to learn so I could get that next job if I want that next job. Because I know there's so much out there. I read those lists, I showed all those jobs out there, and I'm still learning about so many neat career paths. So yeah, good question.
Can you explain like some of the work that you do for the NPS currently with the North Country Trail?
So currently, I'll go over the major things that I do, the top things I would say, bigger things that take most of my time. So I currently process all the volunteer service agreements. I know I got a couple from the Next Gen Coalition. So they come to me and I make sure that they're complete. I file, save them. We have an internal database that I modified and tweaked so I could find things quickly. I also plan chainsaw training for the volunteers. And so we had 8 trainings this past year. So that keeps me quite busy with logistics and trying to get all the prerequisites before the students head out to the training. On that note, I also am the keeper of all training documents and certification to make sure we have those on file. And another big thing I do is fulfill supply requests for the chapters or affiliates. So the field needs signs, tools, decals, PPE. So I do a lot of the purchasing and fulfilling of those requests. And then there's always big projects that come up, one-time projects. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm also the collateral duty safety officer. So there's stuff I do kind of more behind the scenes and education wise.
I have so many questions, so I can keep going, but Steph or Lisa, do you have any more?
You can keep going. You're also asking some of the stuff I think that I was thinking about. So you're doing great.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Do you have like a favorite national park that you've worked at?
Oh, it's one of the hardest questions just because it's really hard to compare the desert with mountains to the ocean. And I feel very fortunate and grateful that I've worked in some pretty amazing national parks. But if you forced me and you made me choose one, it's Canyonlands. And there's this term some parkies use of calling it your heart park. And Canyonlands is my heart park. I think in part that's where my career started. I spent, I would say before my last permanent job, most of my career there, and I worked in all the districts, and I was very familiar with it. And it was just a really, really fun job that I had. Like, who doesn't want to be a backcountry generalist ranger, you know?
Right.
And so Canyonlands for the win, but don't tell anybody.
Okay, so I've got another question. Are there any like certifications or trainings that you took like while you were building your resume with the NPS that you would recommend to other people?
Ooh, that's a tricky question. I think in part because it depends on your field. So there was trainings that I took early on that don't really quite relate to what I'm doing now, and I actually let them lapse. So I used to be a wilderness first responder. I used to be a helicopter crew member training. I used to be like a search and rescue technician 1, or I even forgot the term. So I had a lot of training at the time when I was doing that specific type of work. And then to get where I am now, a lot of it was on the job learning, but I also, in terms of volunteer program management, went and get a certificate in volunteer administration. So I'm trying to think of an overall broad one for every job in the Park Service. And that's hard.
Yeah, there probably isn't one.
If you give me a field, I might be able to go from there.
I have a question about that volunteer administration certificate. Was that like specific to the NPS, or is that just?
No,
needed?
So that's actually through the, oh golly, here. Let me, I want to make sure I get it right.
What was it called again? Volunteer what?
Give me 1 second. I should know, right? So it's the Council for Certification in Volunteer Administration. And so I have certification in volunteer administration. It's called, I'm a CVA. I actually have letters next to my last name, but I don't use them. But it was a good training. It was a lot of, and I'll drop copy. So it's very much self-learning, and it was a thick textbook. I probably read that 2 or 3 times, took notes. They have webinars and Facebook groups, and you have to take an exam, pass the exam, and then you get your certificate.
Do you feel like it helped you a lot in your position?
I maybe at the time when I got it I was only the third person in the National Park Service to have it, and I believe I may be the only one now. I don't think so. In terms of did it get me this job? Probably not. But my mom always said, school and knowledge and education is never wasted. And so there's aspects of that training that that did stick with me that I use. And every 5 years I have to renew. So it's kind of like getting continuing ed credits. So it does keep me fresh on more trends and kind of what the volunteer program world is like, even outside the National Park Service, which I think is good. It can't be just in this silo of like NPS, NPS, NPS. So it kind of gives perspective. So some of this training that I took, it does go into like nonprofits and even like trying to get funding for your program. Well, I get money, you know what I mean? I don't have to go out and get it. So there was some things that didn't apply to my work, but still good knowledge and good things to know. So even if you don't want the certification, they have a textbook. You could buy the textbook and kind of cruise through that. Cool. There's also other books on volunteer program management out there. Just kind of read up on it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see.
Keep going, Felicia.
I was gonna ask what was your experience like coming into the North Country Trail, somewhere you're assumingly not super familiar with, from being at other parks and stuff, and then trying to figure out how to serve the needs of this like huge trail organization.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, every park that I worked at was very different. And every time you start, you kind of got to learn the park and how it operates, because everyone is different. I had never been to Michigan before taking this job. Before I moved to Utah, I'd never been to Utah. Before I moved to Arizona, I'd never been to Utah. Before I went to Washington, I had never been. So the Park Service, my career took me to those places that I was not familiar with. So you really got to kind of soak it all in when you're training, learn as much as you can about the resource in the park, and in my case, the trail and the people, and learn from others, about their positions and how I fit into their operation and my role. I don't go into places like, oh, I'll make all these changes. No, that's not what it is. It's me trying to learn and understand. So I call myself a question queen because I'm very curious, just in general, and also like why we do things, and the why helps me understand. And then also when I have to think about what did that person say, sometimes the why comes first, and then I don't have to beat my head against the wall trying to find the answer. But the North Country Trail, what does make it unique is that the volunteers are very spread out. Before I could just go, I might have to drive a few hours, but before, I could go talk to the volunteers in person and see them. Another difference is that we work very closely with our partner, the North Country Trail Association. So again, just seeing how I fit in and helping where I can. And
yeah, so that's interesting, like how that works where you're a partner with the trail. Are there other trails that partner with the National Park Service?
Yeah, like the Appalachian Trail has an Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Isn't the PCT have
I would assume so, yeah. I don't know if there's like a branch of the National Park Service that partners with each trail. It's kind of an interesting concept.
I think if the trail is administered by the National Park Service, then the National Park Service would be involved. But
so it'd have to be a unit, right?
No? It's not officially a unit.
Right. Yeah, I thought of that after I said that out loud.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then there's other parks like National Park Service sites that do have partners that help, at Cuyahoga National Park. their partner is very involved in their volunteer program, as well as Mississippi River. They have a very involved partner. So partnerships is not unique to the trail system.
Yeah, you guys are all over the place. How often do you get to like leave the office and go out in the field with the position that you're in right now?
My current position, not tons. I think in part of that, I moved here 2 years ago, smack dab, middle of pandemic. We did have travel restrictions. So unfortunately, I have not gone out as much as I wanted. I love volunteers, you know what I mean? And for one reason is their motivation. They're not motivated to volunteer by a paycheck. It's because they want to be here. So it's just really rewarding to be able to provide those opportunities for folks. And so I haven't been out with the volunteers as much. I went on a couple work days with the chapters a little bit closer to here in Lowell. And then we do have, there's a piece of NPS property that the trail goes through about an hour south of Lowell. And we maintain that, we as the North Country National Scenic Trail staff. So about once a month, we have field days where we go and we mow and weed whack and do various projects on the property. So that's always fun. It's like, who wants to go? And everyone's like running out the door, But hopefully that picks up. But I love the outdoors. So anytime I can, I'm outside on my own time, hiking the trail, the North Country Trail, other trails, and exploring. So even if I'm not outside all the time for work, I'm outside as much as I can in my free time.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that that's all the questions that I can think of right now, although I could pick your brain probably a lot if we were in person. Lisa, do you have any other questions?
Not at the moment.
All right.
Let it marinate, and you know how to reach me, and feel free to call. Yeah, my biggest advice would be patience. If you really want a National Park Service career, patience, and get involved and really try to diversify your resume and find what experience you need in order to compete. Oh, another advice. I could keep going. A federal resume is very, very, very different from the private sector resume. My resume at one point, it might have been 13 pages, and then I cut it down to 10, and it's maybe closer to 8 now. So, and that's because I ended up just really shortening my seasonal work, but 18-year career, 8 pages. So if you want me to look at your resume, I'm more happy to. I've done that for others in the past. The key is to be very specific about the type of work that you've done. So it's not like volunteer program manager, process paperwork, and hang out with volunteers. It's literally bullet points of very specific things with like keywords like implemented, developed on my own initiative. But a very thorough resume. And there's, I don't know if it's on USA Jobs, there may be like various trainings and webinars about federal resumes. And if there's one that I come across, I will pass it along to you, Felicia, so you could send it to the next gen folks.
Okay.
Because sometimes parks host those, and sometimes like a Washington office may host those, but
that is like drastically different from a private sector one, because they tell you to keep it like 1 page or shorter.
Yeah. Throw that one out the door. You got to start fresh. And there's certain criteria that has to be in your resume. And on USA Jobs, you could actually, there's a resume builder that will kind of walk you through it. And that way you don't miss any of those requirements. I actually have my own like a Word doc, and then I just upload it. I think in part, there's probably pros and cons to different hiring officials that if you use the resume builder, everything looks similar to somebody else's. So then the hiring official could find it. The other flip is if you have a different resume, it may stand out a little bit more. So that's the route I'm taking, but I don't know if it matters. Just make sure you have that information, because if you don't have certain information, HR right off the bat is gonna whoop, and you're not even gonna,
Tosses it right out. Yep.
your name's not gonna get to the hiring official.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time tonight.
You're welcome.
We actually don't have anything else to discuss because Lisa and I just saw each other a few days ago. So I'm just,
Nice. Just all together. It was wonderful.
yeah, it was. All right. Yeah, thank you. I'm just gonna end the meeting for all of us then, unless you have anything else to share.
No, I will send you some links. It may be tomorrow morning instead of tonight, but
That's A-okay.
and then you could share them. And if there's particular links you would like me to share, it's going to be volunteer.gov, the internship site, and USA Jobs. But if there's something else, let me know.
I think that's perfect.
Very good. Well, thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.